Hello, everybody. I am Matt, and I am joined by Chrissy. Go ahead and say hello.
Hi everyone, Carissy here with Matt.
That's correct. We are Matt and Chrissy and Matt, and
Uh-huh.
combined we are Missy. I don't know. So here we are on Talk Horror to Me. I hope you're ready to talk horror to me tonight. Are you?
As the other half of Krat, yes, I think I am.
Oh, great. Perfect. That was much more wittier than my thing that I took me 30 seconds to think through and try to figure out what to call us combined. What horror are we talking about tonight, Chrissy? What are we discussing? What do you think is going on here?
We finally watched the movie that you had been looking up the release date for months in anticipation of, and it is that none other than Late Night with the Devil.
That's right. We are going to be talking about Late Night with the Devil, and oh, geez, I didn't know this was going to pop straight up. But without further
We're
ado, I
there.
mean,
Here we
we
are.
may as well look at the trailer here really quickly. So this was a before we get into it too deep, this was a Shudder exclusive, and it was produced by I think a couple different companies. I think I've seen Shudder. I think are kind of all part of the same entity at this point. But we found out that it was a small Australian production, and it was to be a Shutter exclusive, and it was released both in theaters and to the Shutter platform. I was thinking there was going to be one of those things that was released both at the same time, but it was not. So they wanted a small theatrical run. I'm kind of surprised about that, to be completely honest. Uh, yeah, and then this is like, I mean, the trailer overall honestly pulled me in, um, because it sort of seemed like something you haven't seen before. Very specifically, like, I don't know. My gut reaction was like, "Oh, it's an exorcism on a late night TV show." I don't know there were more questions than answers in the trailer, and I think that's probably what a good trailer does for you, right?
And I watched this movie not having seen the trailer. This is actually my first time watching the trailer.
Oh,
I
okay.
just went into it totally blind, not knowing at all what to expect. And it's always fun, I think, after the fact, after having watched a movie, go back and watch the trailer and be like, that was a little misleading.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it. So, did you? Well, I guess we'll find out after you watch this trailer. Let's see if you think it was misleading or not. This surprisingly was a long trailer. I think this is like a 2.5 minute trailer, which I always get worried when you have a 2.5 minute trailer for basically an hour and a half long movie, because to me that usually screams we're going to show you the most intriguing or best part of our movie, and there's generally not going to be a lot else going on.
Kind of
Um,
like that. Did I just watch the movie and watching that
yes,
trailer?
right. Yeah, it's like, do you feel like you kind of get the gist of it right there, right? So, um, yeah, it was kind of one of those things where I don't know. After seeing that, what do you feel like it accurately portrayed what you watched on screen?
Um, yes. There were a few parts that it was like, it makes it seem like these people are all being possessed at the end, and that didn't happen. But it also made it seem like the movie took place in more than just one place.
Yeah, they do kind of give you that feeling that it's like it's a talk show, but there's other stuff that it kind of goes to or focuses on. And you know what's funny is I listened to some other reviews too, like prior to even seeing this movie, like people who saw it in theaters or whatever, just to kind of
Okay.
like gauge. And I got the impression that it also took place at other places too, based off of how they were talking. And so I'm like,
Okay.
oh, maybe it's not all just talk show, or maybe it's one of those movies where it's like the talk shows that last 20 minutes or 30, like that's the big, like, hey, we're finally here now doing this thing and it's just going to get nuts. But it's like, nope, whole movie takes place on the talk show, a single set, it's kind of just conversations between people. I guess, should we, I'm it's like Mr. Transition. I feel like we got too many transitions here, but do you want to talk about the plot? Are we ready to get into
Let's get into it. Let's
because
do it.
okay,
Let's
here we go.
transition.
Here we go. We're transitioning now.
We're so excited.
Oh,
That was a fun
Do
transition.
you feel transitioned? Okay,
I
we
feel
are
transitioned.
we are ready for this presentation here. Um, so I guess am I going through? I can't remember who did the last one because the last one was a double feature, so we each took turns.
You
You
get at it.
you want me to get at the
tell me
plot?
what this movie was about.
Okay, well, I'm not going to read this text, but I'll give you the plot kind of based on my own opinion here. But basically, I don't want to say a washed up talk show host, but it's a struggling talk show host and the very competitive talk show host environment is kind of struggling to meet numbers. He has got a lot of going on in his personal life. His wife just died. And there's kind of alludes to him being an alcoholic and um, just kind of struggling to make an entertaining show and keep up with his career and his personal life and everything. So um, he kind of gets to a point to where they are having a, I guess it's a Halloween. Does it take place on Halloween? I don't remember if it takes place on
Yes, I
Halloween.
think it's Halloween night.
Okay.
And what? This is the 70s?
Yes, this takes place in the 70s. Yep, 1977. And which I was kind of an era of the I can't remember the main tagline that they called it, but it was the satanic panic era where, you know, everybody's worried about the devil and Satan and you know, that was a good old Christian nationalist kind of mentality of we got to be down with the devil. And they kind of decided to have a guest on there, two guests per se on their Halloween episode. One who is basically somebody that debunks, you know, psychics and supernatural, and you know, is like the key skeptic, and then somebody who basically channels a demon through them on the show. Or I guess there's a couple different kind of um, supernatural people that sort of show up on the show and are trying to use their talents for things. And it's really just sort of to boost engagement to get some of those numbers back. And um, before you know it, things kind of start to go awry on Jack Delroy's talk show set, if you will. And I think, is there anything that I'm missing there? Is there anything? I think that's a pretty good uh, ground level description of what this movie provides. Is
Because then it gets into the guests interacting with each other and lots of different things happening and different interactions with like it being on the same set and there being maybe like 5 characters that it's really going between, 6, 7 maybe tops, that really are like characters in there kind of thing that have lines and stuff. And it's like it it's only an hour and a half long, but they pack a lot into that.
Mhm.
And I don't know, do the
It is
ending,
constantly
like it's
moving.
just like all of a sudden it's the ending and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, you know what's kind of interesting about it is that movie is basically filmed as like a late night show would be.
Oh, isn't
They
it part of a documentary? Like that's kind of how the beginning makes it. It's like, here's footage, like actual footage from that night that was never
yeah,
aired.
maybe
But then they don't really close with a documentary type
yeah,
thing.
they don't. Yeah, not at all. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, right at the beginning they sort of do it like Jack Delroy, one of, you
Yeah,
know,
and here's
America's
some footage
talk
of
show,
the
whatever, you know, kind of thing. It's almost like there's a news segment talking about
Mhm.
that one fateful
Yeah.
night on 1977 talk show Jack Delroy. Um, and yes, it's sort of like all of a sudden it sort of like throws you in it. It gives you some of the background as to why he's like his wife died from cancer. She was his right hand person, and you know, now he's turned to alcohol, and he spent a lot of time at this, you know, creepy woodland lodge with the exclusive, you know, inhabitants there, like kind of weird stuff that it's like he's sort of turning into a weird guy. And he's struggling to maintain that like talk show hype popularity, whatever. He's in danger of being replaced or canceled, basically.
Well,
um
and it's like his ratings were always pretty low. He was always in the fight for being the head late night guy,
And I
which is
think he
kind of a
mentioned
fun aspect of it. But it,
he specifically mentioned Carson too, that, like,
yeah,
you gotta
yeah,
Carson are trying to keep up with that or, whatever. They're trying to, um, they name drop him a couple times.
hmm
Okay, alright, so he's supposed to be, like, number 2, number 3, and Carson's the big guy that they're trying to compete with sort of thing.
and they make that illusion at the beginning, or I guess like the reference to him being part of like a cult. And so you see that kind of strewn throughout where it's that description of like almost like the behind the music kind of thing, where it's like talking about his past and showing video clips and just still images, which I thought was a really cool way to intro it and then get you right into that thing. But I feel like they kind of lost it through. And if they had held on to doing stuff like that, but then from there it was like all the events took place over the what? Course of a couple of hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was saying is that it really does feel like the pacing is, like, basically an hour of broadcast television.
Yeah.
It's like it's the, hey, them kind of briefing right before they go live, and then it's like, hey, they go live, he's doing his monologue, he's got his right-hand man that he's, cracking jokes on, doing back and forth,
Not
and then
with,
it's like,
on, yeah.
yeah, do it with on yeah, exactly. He's completely an underappreciated, sidekick, if you will, and you feel that, which it's never expanded on at all, really, through that story. Um, and so anyway, it's just kind of one of those things that was like, it was interesting. Um, and then it's like, oh, now commercial break, and now it's on to a kind of behind the scenes, him talking with the producer and what they're doing next, and yada yada yada, back to the show, back from commercial break, now back to the show, bringing on our first guest, and the first guest doing their thing. And so it was kind of this interesting, like, you're basically watching a live broadcast show over the course of this movie, production and all, not just the actual show, but like the behind the scenes and stuff too. So
Mhm.
it's kind of interesting. I like that. I mean, I can't think of another movie that's done that, but yeah.
So the budget, we didn't really
Budget,
know.
yeah, budget was, you couldn't really find anything on. It just, honestly, a lot of what people said is that it was like, is that it was low budget. They said it just had a low budget. It was didn't not expensive to make. Um, this was an Australian movie that was, in conjunction. We said it was in conjunction with the United States and United Arab Emirates. I'm assuming that's probably production money, but it was
Mhm.
filmed in a studio lot in Australia, in Melbourne. And uh, the one number that I did find is they said the visual effects budget was about $150,000. So not a lot of money spent there. But then you also kind of look at the cast, and you figure, I mean, basically what's on the cover right there is your entirety of your cast. It's like six
Yeah.
people total, none of which are like huge names. There are people that you recognize, but it's not like, Tom Cruise or anybody sitting there or anything else.
Or
So
anyone really whose name you know.
yeah, you wouldn't know their names, but you would know their face. You would have seen them somewhere else. Um, and so yeah, it's like you figure the budget's probably low there. All the people in the audience are just kind of extras, or probably crew or staff or somebody. So yeah, not a lot of money spent. And then box office wise, it was a short stint before it went to streaming. I think it was only like a month or something. It was like three weeks to a month. They pulled 12.1 million, which I did find that it said that that was IFC's most successful movie ever. And I don't know if that was at a jab, because I mean, they basically said it was like a huge success. Like, it was like way more money than what it cost to produce. So it sounded like it was a big hit. Uh,
Okay.
and after that, after the theatrical run, which wasn't that long, it just went to Shudder, and it's been on Shudder as a Shudder exclusive since they were the ones that produced it. And I looked, so Shudder is a part of IFC, and both IFC and Shudder are part of AMC.
Oh, okay.
AMC movies or films or studios or whatever it is. So they're all just kind of a giant, subsidiary conglomerate of just, production companies that decided to make this thing. But yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. So, um, yeah, only an hour and a half. And I read somewhere, I think like the actual movie is only like an hour and 26 minutes, which is like, you need an hour and a half to be considered a feature film, specifically 90 minutes. So, I mean,
Okay.
they barely made the mark. It's like 3 minutes. It's probably your credits right there. They probably got the three
Yeah,
minute
just
credits
enough.
going on, just enough. So let's see. Let's keep moving on. Characters. You want to detail kind of characters? I know I always said there's sort of like six, but kind of in this frame here, I sort of pulled together, I think, a bulk of them. There's only one other sort of main character that is not shown here, but you
So
want to
at
give us a
this
background?
point, yeah, at this point in the movie, Christu, the guy who was the first guest, and what would you say? He was a
He
like
was kind of like a psychic, right?
medium, like a psychic. Yeah, someone who could like talk to the spirits. And so he is not in there at this point. But then you have he was the first guest. Jack Delroy's the one in the center with like the tie and suit. And he's the host that we've been talking about that might be involved in culty stuff, whose wife died of cancer and who's like doing this. It's sweeps week. I've got this comeback show. We've got some good stuff lined up. So then you have Christu, who was the first guest, who did some entertaining things. It was pretty funny, some of the exchanges, and I thought that was pretty clever writing. And then you get this guy in the fancy, like, that looks almost
Yes,
like
like a smoking
velvet.
jacket kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
like it looks
velvet
so
smoking
soft.
jacket.
Um,
Yeah.
and you get this guy who you were talking about is the one who's there to kind of debunk everything.
Yeah, I think so. So the guy's name is James Randi, who he just passed away. He was 90 something years old. He just passed away in 2020. But he was a magician and kind of an author, and basically he had a $1 million bounty that if there's anybody who could prove without a doubt of psychic or supernatural ability, that it actually existed and they had these powers and whatever, that you would get $1 million. But he would always challenge these people that they would have to do it like on live television in front of people, and where he could also debunk them, in their process. And um, basically either he would completely destroy them, or kind of the psychics or readers would always have excuses as to, oh, I'm not able to pick up the wavelengths in the studio, or the cameras or lights are affecting my psychic abilities. And so it's like it always fell through. But this guy just reeks of being a movie representation of James Randi, because he did have a very blunt way about speaking about things, and um, kind of no shame in terms of ripping people's serious mystic careers apart, if
Right,
you will.
yeah.
So yeah,
So
I
then
didn't want to derail your train of thought. I'm
no, no,
sorry.
no, you good. I had nothing else to say. It's like, yep, you did
Okay.
it pretty comprehensive. That's what that was.
Oh well, thank you. All right, thank
So
you.
then we have over here the woman and the doctor um in the
I'm not.
movie. I
I'm not
forget.
sure of her
I'm
name,
like,
but she's
it's not Laura.
basically, was she a psychiatrist or like a therapist?
He
And
says that he makes some kind of comment about like you call yourself what it was, and she goes, "But that's because that's what I am."
yeah,
And like she goes into like she got her doctorate in this, and it's like parapsychology or something like that. Um, I can't remember exactly, but she was doing a lot of research into this basically cult who would do rituals, and that's where she ended up adopting this girl here named Lily, who had been part of those rituals. And she talked about how she did interviews with the devil who was possessing her,
Mm.
and wrote a book about it, and that's what she was there to talk about. And it was kind of, you find out in a way almost that like Jack set it up so that he was there to kind of debunk the other guests, that velvet suit guy.
Yeah, yeah, it was almost to create a contention between guests, right? Like you sort of wanted them to snap at each other at some point in
Yeah,
time because it makes good television, right? That was the whole
yeah.
point, was um not to just have random psychic things on Halloween, but have somebody sort of also rip it apart at the same time.
Because
Um
it did talk about how when he after his wife died, and he had been doing more types of shows that were almost similar to like Jerry Springer type things, where it was a lot of controversial stuff and things really just to make a fuss of stuff.
Yeah, and I think, for the most part, what's kind of interesting about these characters is, again, there's only like six main characters. I mean, four of which are shown here in this still, but you there's the movie's an hour and a half, so you really don't have a lot of time to develop characters, but they do a very good job of sort of making you understand what each of these people's roles are
Yep.
very quickly.
Yep.
Like they get you up to speed very, very quickly. Just in the way that they talk to each other and just even the way that they act between one another right away. It's like everybody's role and what it's going to be for the remainder of this film. So kudos for that. It's very hard to make a compelling 90-minute movie that gets you everything you need to know in that amount of time. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why this movie's so, spoilers, highly rated. But we'll get there when we get there. When we get there. Do you have anything else to talk about on the character front, or do we just want to keep like
No, I
sailing
think
through it?
it's a lot of like what you just said, of the characters were developed really well. I think a lot of that had to do with costuming and makeup, and you really, because that gave you a good sense of who they were and where this was taking place. But the acting in it was also really, really good, and I think each person played their role very well.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job. The only one thing, and I'll say this as nice as I possibly can.
Okay.
But the guy who plays Jack, this David Das Mac Malkian. I don't know, Das Malkian. I'm not sure how you say his last name. That's gonna be my guess. Um, he does not strike me as a talk show personality, and maybe they did that on purpose. Maybe they did that on purpose because it's like, hey, the struggling guy. He's not number one. He's not a Johnny Carson, right? Maybe he just doesn't have that like feel or look to me. Maybe I guess he has like a Jimmy Fallon kind of thing. I don't know.
He
I'm not
is
sure.
very kind of Jimmy Fallon-y.
Yeah, maybe. So I don't know. That's my one criticism, but everybody else I think was like perfect in their roles.
Okay.
Um, cinematography.
Oh my
So
gosh. I just have to talk about that middle image real quick, reminding me of a scene from The Lord of the Rings. Do you know what I'm talking about?
oh,
When
I'm gonna
they're
make a
with the
guess. Kind of an
elves
in. Oh
and
yeah.
he like sees Frodo with the ring for the first time since he's left it. And he like goes to touch it and he makes a face that looks very similar to this if you pause it just right.
Well, and Bilbo does that at the very end too when he sees the ring
Yes. Yep.
hanging from
Yep.
yeah. Or I should say the very end, but when he sees him, yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, yeah. So interesting thing about the cinematography on this, and it's really hard to represent on here because most of these images, and I think all three of these are probably a good representation of them in between, but most of the movie is 4:3 and very film grain. It almost feels like VHS. Like it's I should say it's not hard to determine what's going on, but it definitely has this kind of like fuzzy 1970s. You're watching it on a CRT TV kind of feel.
It really
Um,
feels kind of authentic.
yeah, yeah, it does. They do a really, really good job with that for sure. And when it's live, when they're live filming the show, it's in that 4:3 color kind of film grainy. But then when they take a commercial break and it goes behind the scenes, There's a couple scenes where like Jack's talking with his producer and some of the staff and some other people. It's 16 by 9 and it's black and white. Which is, typically how that's how they used to sort of shoot like behind the scenes on movies. Like behind the scene movie photographers would shoot black and white stills with actors and just behind the scenes stuff. So um it really felt like a throwback to that in a way.
Okay.
But so it changes your aspect ratio, it changes your color grading. It's a lot more clear. And it's just kind of an interesting take between like what's live TV and what's like behind the scenes going on there.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's not disorienting enough. It doesn't happen enough to where you're like, oh my god, my brain's hurting. Like I can't I can't focus on one thing or another. But
And I think
um,
it's a way that they're able to get so much in such a short amount of time, because it's like the way that they frame it, the way that they do those different shots really is like, okay, this is a quick behind the scenes, we're at commercial. Okay, now we're back on the air kind of thing
yes,
to like
right.
really help move you along the plot.
And that pacing's real fast. That
Mhm.
pacing's real fast, and it's great. This movie keeps moving, and that feels really good. I have no complaints about the pacing or anything like that. The one time where things don't meet that formula, the 4:3 film grain live studio show, or the black and white 16 by 9 behind the scenes, is there's the very end. It's like the very end of Act
Mm.
3 in this movie, and it sort of goes into this weird, almost dream like sequence, if you will, of just
Yep.
things happening. The sets changing, things are changing around him, and it is almost like full modern high def. It's 16 by 9. It doesn't there's no film grain anything like this. It's in this still right here where Jack is kind of like screaming, he's got his mouth open, but you can see how much cleaner that picture is compared to like the middle one, which is the live TV kind of film grainy sequence there. So uh that's the only thing that's kind of out there. And so I don't know if I've seen a movie change aspect ratios and film just filters and all of these different things so frequently, but it wasn't jarring though either. It just
No,
all kind of worked.
it did work until I think until the end, where it does look so different and you get so taken out of it, or maybe that's how you get brought to such an abrupt ending, because like I said, it doesn't tie back at all to the kind of intro that it had of it being part of like a documentary of some kind.
Yeah, that was really strange why they went for that. So I mean, to kind of, we're sort of getting into spoilers territory because you kind of can't not talk about the
If you
ending.
read that description on the previous slide,
Yeah,
it would have been spoilered anyway.
yeah.
So,
Well, so kind of basically what happens is they start to do this actual it's not an exorcism, but it's a communication. I don't know what the interview. I guess they call it an
yeah,
interview, right? They're interviewing this like demon devil through this little girl. And
Mr. Wiggles.
yep, yeah, Mr. Wiggles. And then basically the demon kind of goes like nuts. It's like, I'm done playing around. And it goes on sort of a murder spree, and the skeptic guy there, I mean, basically gets his face melted, his whole body gets um melted, and Jack is kind of like caught in the middle of this. The lady that's conducting the interview, she gets her throat split. I think she's kind of like thrust in the air and sort of gets her throat cut open and everything. So it's just going complete chaos. It's just going
The
complete.
intro voice guy, his I think neck gets broken, which
Yeah.
there's foreshadowing to that, because he says something about not wanting his neck to be twisted, and then that's how he ends up dying.
Yes. Yes. That's perfect. So I mean, there's a lot of like it basically hits the fan is what happens.
And then that's
Um,
when you go through that weird sequence of encountering different show like episodes that had been referenced earlier, or him just interacting with different people, like his wife who was on her deathbed, or like the references back to the woodsy cult he's part of.
Yeah, Jack basically gets thrown into this dream state that is
Yeah.
obviously hosted or concocted by this demon, throwing him through just kind of a bunch of like almost obscure versions of events that happened in his life. Um, and it all kind of ends in a mess. Maybe I won't go that far in the spoiler, but it's one of those movies that sort of just ends abruptly. It just ends. Um, there's no heroic moment of Jack saved the day and redeemed himself. Or the big sci-fi monster was finally killed, and the main characters escape alive and are married and happily ever after. Like, there's no kind of ending like that. This very much so is a um kind of, as I alluded to in the beginning, a 1 hour stint of a show that just went to shit on Halloween
Yeah.
night in 1977. Um, so I personally think, I'm like, if you're one of those people that you want an extremely satisfying conclusion, all the loose ends tied up, and
Hi,
you like
that's
your
me.
movies boxed, right? Like, this probably isn't for you. Um, yeah, I'll take a breather there and let you rip that apart, or agree or disagree or whatever.
Well, maybe we should move forward past the
Sure,
cinematography.
sure. Let's move. Let's keep moving.
Let's keep
All right.
on rolling.
So we're in kind of the what critics and people like us thought, for the most part. Do you want to give a rundown? You want me to? Who do you want to talk about this?
Well, just from my quick glance over of this, even though I put some of these images in, uh, I think other than the Roger and Ebert one, they all seem pretty good. That one seems
Yeah,
pretty low.
I will tell you this: Roger and Ebert, they're kind of Debbie Downers. They're snooty. They're snooty patooties. I always put them on there because they are a notable reviewer. But
Yeah,
I feel like they have that really like I don't know. It's almost like this trendy hipster idea of like, well, I saw cinema before cinema was mainstream. Like, they sniffing their own farts on stuff. So
like
I always think
such those characters in what is it, Sesame Street?
uh, I don't know if I would go like that far, but it is definitely like one of those things where you're just like, okay, all right, we get it. You guys are always going to disagree with whatever the mainstream
Yeah,
feels on stuff.
always
So
the contrarians.
yes, yep. But yeah, I mean, like, looking at the tomato meter, 97%, with an audience score of 81%, and I think we were reading somewhere that it says this is like the year's highest rated horror movie. But I also kind of brought up the point that it's like, well, you still got October, buddy.
Yeah, yeah, we're still fresh,
Yes,
fresh into 2024, and
you got a hot minute left.
yep,
But yeah, IMDb. I mean, all these are kind of in the 70s areas, which I think for the most part is like fair. And it's not often that you see the critics pretty much aligning with like viewers, but I mean, basically the same across the board. I mean, from a
yeah.
Metacritic perspective, it's the same. Rotten Tomatoes is really not that far off. So I don't know. Do you, without giving your final score, do you agree with this? Do you think any? I mean, despite the Roger Ebert.
I
Um,
understand them. I feel like I even understand the Roger Ebert one of like, I think a lot of it for me was how it was shot. It was really the cinematography of it, of the bringing you through very quickly, the costuming, the set design, all the little like things, like your fun transitions their little like commercial things are the Cavendish Group, and just really that feel of
Yeah.
being on that late night set. And even like the beginning where they're showing like the zoom in thing of like who's going to be on the show, like the intro, and it was very like OG
Oh,
Saturday
yeah.
Night Live kind of thing. So it like really gets you into the movie really well. But I feel like because it does that so well, it kind of hides that there's a lot of loose ends and that there's a lot of very underdeveloped things. But it also, in a way, just makes it feel very like scattered and very abrupt.
You know what would be really interesting? I was just thinking about that. What would be really interesting, whether it was a fan edit or a director's re-edit or something, is to literally release this movie as an episode, ads and all, fake ads and stuff in between. Like, so when they do the ad breaks, it's like you are literally watching an episode of television.
So you don't see like those interactions with the
You don't see the
producer.
behind the scenes
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
producer
yeah.
conversations and all that stuff. You literally just watch it. Like, I wonder what that movie would look like then. I think that'd be a fun thing to play with or conceptualize. But anyway, again, this is me, as the armchair kind of quarterback. Yeah. Like,
The armchair
if I
quarterback.
was to make the movie, I would have done it this way. No, I'm gonna be like that. Uh, yeah, I mean, do we want to get to a point where like we reveal kind of where we think it's at?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the movie that like is worth noting. Like the relationships between the characters, interactions with the characters.
The one thing that was like interesting that I'm almost like, well, you should probably have either talked about it more or not brought it up at all.
Yeah.
Is the um they allude to Jack kind of hiding away in this exclusive club like in the woods,
Mhm.
and you obviously like get this feeling that like they did weird shit there. Like they were either doing, devil worshipy stuff or just like that kind of like dirty Hollywood scandalous things that like you almost like Epstein Island levels. Like they don't tell you what it is, but it's definitely like this kind of exclusive place for rich people out there in these woods. And he spends a lot of time there. That's all you know. Um, and they don't ever really go into it more or why that's important or why even the demon brings it up, because even the demon says something to the effect of like, do you remember a blah 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 blah, just like you were doing out in the woods or something like that, or the time that just like the time you spent out in those woods. um it's like, well, what's out there? And I don't need everything explained, but like paint me a little bit of a picture so I understand what he was getting into to be like, oh, that's why he's this way, or that's why this is happening.
I take it to be kind of as like, because I was referring it to as the culty stuff he was into. And I
Hmm.
take it almost as like, the movie The Skulls, where they're like
Oh
that
yeah.
secret society kind of thing. But
Yes.
it's like they somehow, because they're part of this society, they're the ones who become presidents or governors or like CEO type things. And it's like it kind of made that reference in the weird documentary intro of like, where these really important people were part of this, and like even with his show being the night owls kind of thing, like
Hmm.
there was some kind of references to the owls, and there were like a bird creature kind of thing imagery in the like stills that they showed at the beginning. But then at the end when he's starting to go through the weird like dream like thing, there's something he drinks from like a cup with the big bird, and you see it's almost kind of like a
Oh
ritual.
yeah.
Like, did
Yeah.
he only get this because of some kind of cult stuff he did? And if so, is that why his wife, because they made a point of saying she had never been a smoker and she died of lung cancer. So it's like, did he sacrifice her for his success kind of thing?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and because those are all good points. I remember that sequence pretty vividly, but for some reason, some of those dialogue things didn't like
Because they didn't
stand out to
connect
me
very
as much.
well.
So
They could have done I think the
yeah.
writing in this, There were clever parts. There were parts that made sense, that flowed well. I think they could have made things just a little tighter.
Yeah. Yeah, we love a good tight movie.
Toy like a toyga.
Toy like a toy. Okay, so I mean, let's get into just like review it. You know, I can be should I do a clickbaity kind of intro so I can
Do it. Do
cut
it.
it up?
Do it.
Okay, hold on, let me put on my best movie guy face
In a
and get it.
world.
Yeah. In a world about movies. um so so Chrissy, we just watched Late Night with the Devil and talked about it on our amazing, highly successful podcast on YouTube and Twitch. But now we are at the point where we need to review it and say how what we thought of this movie. Is it? Let me ask you, Chrissy, is this movie worth it? And what would you rate this out of 10?
Yes, this is a worth it movie. I am somebody who has a hard time sitting down and watching a movie. So I watched it a couple times overall, watching the entire thing put together once, as I do. So yeah, watch it. But I will say there's some movies we've watched that I thought were like real awesome. And then there were some movies that I thought were just like not awesome. And this one was hard for me to determine what my actual feelings about it were, because I think I was so drawn in by like, whoa, it's like really watching something from the 70s. And even though I'm a 90s baby, it was kind of nostalgic. And just, I guess, from watching like a lot of VH1, like I love the 70s kind of thing. So it's like,
Hmm.
I liked that, but was it enough to make me love the movie? And I think the answer is no. I think there's a lot of things that like I wish it had gone in slightly different directions a couple times throughout the movie. Otherwise, I don't really like have very many complaints about it. It was a pretty good movie. Um, would I watch it? Yeah. Would I recommend watching it? Yeah. But would I give it a 5? Like, ugh, what? Huh? Out of 10? Yeah.
Wow, so you're like middle of the line.
Yeah.
You're at that 5 out of 10 point. Okay. You know what's crazy? Okay, I'm gonna say my piece and then I'll tell you where I'm at. So
Okay.
here's the thing. I think this movie is a very novel concept. I mean, the idea of like a day in the life, or that a movie takes place over the course of an hour or 2 hours, and
Mhm.
movie time is not new. Other movies have done that, and it is what it is. But this is the first one that I can really think of that it's like, oh no, this takes place during a late night talk show, right? And it's that over the span. So like that is at its core is a very novel concept in my opinion. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I think even if I don't think it was fleshed out in the best way possible, it was interesting to watch somebody else's attempt at doing that. And I think they did a fairly, great job at accomplishing that. Um, this is one of those things where it's like, I am the biggest advocate for 90-minute movies, and this fits the 90-minute movie mark. And this is compelling to watch over the course of 90 minutes. The pacing's really good, and you do kind of want to keep watching it. But I almost feel like for the complexity of some of these characters, especially the main character like Jack, and maybe even the dynamic with his like sidekick and stuff, like it feels like there's so much left out. And not that I want just a ginormous amount of character dump information and to know everything about these characters. Mystery is good for the sake of characters and storytelling, but it feels like there's almost nothing. Like you got to run with nothing. And so when you've got nothing, it's more or less of what are they throwing on screen? What kind of effects are they throwing at you? What kind of weird stuff's happening to sort of fill in those gaps? And this movie has its fair share of segments that are like that. Because of that, I give this uh, you know 6 hey how you doing monologues out of 10. So I think I'm really at that 6 mark. Like I don't think I'm right at the middle at like the 5, but 7, even 7 on its own, past the concept of being like a talk show is I'm not getting much more out of it. And
Yeah.
I don't think this is gonna be a movie that, like, sticks with me, that, and I will say this because we watched it basically, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. We were late on this
Yeah.
podcast. We watched it two or 3 weeks ago or something, and I've had time to let it gestate. And um, there's a lot that I'm not like, oh man, I want to go back and watch that sequence again. Like that was really good. There's
No.
yeah, it was an interesting little movie.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed.
and it worked well, and I'm sure it'll do just fine on Shudder. But I get why it probably did not have as big of a theatrical run as it did, or waited to release it in October or something against other horror movies, because I don't think it probably
Mhm.
would have done nearly as well. So it's kind of an art housey horror movie.
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
But with that being said, you out of 5, me out of 6. We are going to talk about, I guess, what we would recommend if you actually like this movie. What would we recommend in comparison? Are you ready to move on to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Here we go. Clickbait in 3, 2, 1. So, Chrissy, we just watched Late Night with the Devil, and if you like that movie, we both recommend something to watch in conjunction with that film. Now, would you like to tell me the movie that you would recommend if you liked A Late Night with the Devil?
Well, if you liked A Late Night with the Devil, I recommend then that you watch the entire Hell House LLC series,
Huh?
which I think has like 4 or 5 movies in it, all pretty good in their own respect, but also watch them all because that's more fun. But the reason that I think that The Late Night with the Devil reminded me of the Hell House movies LLC is because it was kind of shot in the way that I wish Late Night with the Devil had been more shot in like that weird documentary, almost like found footage. I'm presenting this to you and I'm splicing it all together in a way that really tells the story. But then there's also like the interview aspects of it, with this being like a talk show, and then this being people like actually making a movie and wanting to interview the people. And also, I feel like some of the cinematography, as far as like it was very different, but you kind of get that same feel because some of the shots were just slightly different than others in a way, just like in this movie. Other than that, very, very different. I think that if Late Night with the Devil had a little bit more of Hell House flavor to it, I think I would have liked it more. So it's like, this movie makes me think of it because I wish this is what it was.
So I'm looking forward to this. What's kind of interesting that I was reading on it, like these are the Hell House movies are Shudder exclusives, and they are also on AMC Plus. So they're kind of a
Oh,
part of
okay.
that, kind of a part of that same production
Same
universe,
vibey.
if
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
will. Yeah. So I am interested into. I'm not one of those people that goes down a rabbit hole and is like, I'm going to watch all 5 of these unless I like really love it. So I at least want to watch the first one. I want to see the first
Yes.
one. I'm gonna dive in, and we're gonna take a look and kind of see what that looks like. Um, However, that being said, I will personally say that I think if you like Late Night with the Devil, a movie you should check out is The Fourth Kind. This is a movie that stars Mia Jovovich and has a couple other notable people that sort of pop in and out of it. It is an alien abduction film, so it's not exactly horror, but it kind of dips into the scary side of alien abduction, of alien not invasion, because it's not a full invasion, but like an alien having an interest in a particular family or set of people, in the same way that a demon would be sort of toying with 3 or 4 late night talk show guests.
Okay.
um, and it sort of dips into that, like, what does it mean? And it's very much so takes place over a short amount of time. It sort of has that very open-ended ending of, hey, they didn't go on an alien murdering rampage, right? It's just you find out that aliens just kind of do this, and they happen to be the next victim, sort of thing. Um, so it actually kind of has a very similar vibe, in my opinion, and I think it works, not so much from the demonic possession, but just sort of the premise of this thing toying with other people, taking small cast, small set of people, small locations. It works, I think, pretty well for that. So if you liked A Late Night with the Devil, I recommend The Fourth Kind.
All right.
Well, Chrissy, I think we're at the end here.
Yes,
Um,
I think so too.
I think so. So I would like to thank you for talking horror to me.
All right, and I guess we'll talk horror again next week.
Talk
Goodbye.
horror again. Goodbye. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye now.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.